Welcome to our live stream Q&A time. I trust that we find you well this morning. As we continue to journey through this challenging time as a community and even as a nation, I'd like to particularly recognise and thank each parent for the part that they have played in helping to ensure that the spread of COVID-19 has been minimalised, and by continuing to embrace the social distancing strategies that we've been called to do. See, because it's you parents in particular, you have been at the coalface of these strategies, and ultimately, as each family has played their particular part, as a community, a state, and even a nation, we've been able to flatten the curve successfully. So I just want to say thank you and bless you for this. I'd also like to just take this opportunity to affirm each of the families who have taken the opportunity to seek the financial or pastoral care support that we have offered. See, we count it an absolute privilege of being able to stand with you during this time. And we would encourage you, each families, to continue to seek out this support in the future as it's required. But as we just about to start our Q&A time, I'd now like to just spend some time and just pray, as we do as a tradition of our community. So let's pray together. Gracious God and Heavenly Father, we say thank you for the gift of this new day. We thank you for the gift of life to enable us to enjoy this day. And we ask that as we use this gift, we may bring honour and glory to you. Bless this time as we gather as a community online together. May you just draw us closer together and draw us closer to you. And we commit our Q&A time to you in Jesus' precious name. Today I'm joined by the principal of the secondary school here at Werribee, Deborah Letcher, as well as the head of learning and teaching, Graham Hallett. And we would like to take this opportunity to answer some of the questions that you may have. And you can actually start asking these questions right now by simply entering your questions into the chat section. And the team behind the scenes will actually gather those questions and bring them towards Deborah, Graham and myself, as well as behind the scenes we've got Peter Lamprex, the year 10 to 12 head of learning module, and Matthew Puller, who is the secondary learning and teaching coordinator, are also there to help answer any of your questions this morning. But before we answer any of your questions, Deborah and I would like to just take a few moments to talk about remote learning and how we have elected to deliver remote learning at Heathdale Christian College. See, each school, whether it's a state, Catholic or independent school, has actually tailored the delivery of remote learning to their particular community. And we would like to further explain how we are tailoring remote learning to the Heathdale community. And in a moment, there'll be Deborah and Graham will actually particularly be able to speak to that. But in the meantime, I would like to add some other things to you. Last week, you should have received an email from me that attempted to address the mixed messages that we were receiving between the federal and state governments on how schools should be operating. You know, this is not the first stoush between these two levels of government, and I suggest to you that it won't be the last one. But the impact of such a stoush is that it creates confusion instead of clarity. And instead of working in unison, it's created division. And this is most unfortunate for each and every person. And can I say to you, as a follower of Jesus, I really want to fulfill the call that God has placed upon me to honour all those who lead me. But I do find it really challenging when I'm actually caught in the middle of such a stoush. So then, as an executive principal, the one who actually is called to make decisions for this community, I'd like to remind you that I will always prioritise the well-being of the health and safety of all members of our community, and in particular, our students. So this is why, when I'm caught in the middle of conflicting advice on how schools should operate, I first seek out the advice of the Victorian Chief Medical Officer, Professor Brett Sutton, along with the State Educational Minister, James Merlino, and with our peak representative body of Independent Schools Victoria's CEO, Michelle Green, to help me to make decisions that I need to do. Because these people will give me a particular Victorian perspective on what is the context that we need to address. And the decisions that the decisions that I am going to need to make are really significant ones and not ones that I can make in isolation. So to make wise and informed decisions, I need the best advice from these people. And they are the ones that have provided me with this advice over the last 2 months. And I've really appreciated the advice that they've given. And as we move forward, I will continue to seek their wisdom and their guidance. In the midst of all the confusing chatter of what schools will and won't do, I just would like to remind our community of something that I stated to you at the start of this term. And that's when I informed you that we would continue to deliver remote learning until the end of May. And our position on this has not changed. Yes, we've made some tweaks, such as on-campus supervision for the children of essential workers and children who are at risk. And as of today, our kinder program is open to all families who have kinder kids, as well as offering to some of our VCE students the opportunity mode in which we will deliver the Heathdale curriculum until the end of May. On May 11, Professor Sutton is due to meet with the Premier and the State Cabinet to provide the latest update and help to determine if this current state of emergency will begin to be lifted. Once this has been determined, I have no doubts that the additional information will be provided, and specifically about schooling. But while we wait for this latest update, behind the scenes, my team and I have already started a series of conversations on how we will transition from all of our students from remote learning to campus-based learning. What we've done is we've started to identify the key pieces of this process and how they can then be mapped out to ensure that the transition from remote learning back to campus-based learning is smooth and successful for both students and the staff. We have not put any times or dates to these steps yet, because what our focus has been upon, let's get the sequence right. And the timing of these steps will then be informed by the announcement on May 11 by Professor Sutton and Premier Dan Andrews. Then, once we have a clear plan with dates, we'll then let you know what's happening. So, what I'm asking for in the meantime is for you to continue for your patience and your prayers as we continue to develop this transition plan. And in concluding, I'd just like to share with you one last thing. You may have noticed over the weekend, for example, there was much spoken about by being removed from the classroom, how this will negatively impact the students' learning. Well, last week I came across a really interesting article that was reported in The Age. And it was an interview with Professor Hattie, who was a world-renowned academic and on building effective teaching and learning contexts. And Professor Hattie is actually based at the Melbourne University. So he not only has a global understanding, but he has a strong understanding of our context here in Victoria. Professor Hattie commented on a study that was conducted by the New Zealand government that was after the Christchurch was devastated by the massive earthquakes. The devastation was so severe that schools were completely closed for a term, and during that time, no teaching or formal learning took place. He then went on to explain that one of the key findings of this study was that Christchurch students actually outperformed all of their other students across the nation, and especially those in their final year of schooling. And we would call that our VCE, or especially our Year 12 students. Professor Hattie commented then that the finding of the study was, upon the return to teaching, our campus teaching, the teachers ensured that the students learnt the essentials, but were also able to find creative ways in which to support students so they each experienced learning success. And as I pondered this statement, I then started to think about the team here at Heathdale. And I just know our staff will likewise, and have already, continue to support your son and your daughter's learning so that they will continue to experience learning success. And I know that they have and that they will also find creative ways to ensure that your child experiences learning success. And this is why I want to commend the Heathdale teaching staff to you. But enough from me right now. And what I'd like to do is hand it over to Deborah, because she'd like to share some of her reflections on remote learning. And then after that, we'll be starting to take your questions. So Deborah, over to you.
Thanks, Ross. It's wonderful to be able to provide an update on how remote learning is happening and progressing in the secondary school at the moment. I think as we enter week 4 of term 2, we can say that there's definitely a rhythm developing for most students and classes. We've been really pleased by the high attendance rate that we've had for live classes for our students. Our teachers do keep a roll and follow up any students that don't attend, but really the vast majority of our students have been getting online and getting involved, getting through really productive work. There's things being handed in, being marked, being handed back, and we can see that learning and progress is happening throughout our year levels. Our students have also been great at turning up at 8:40 for morning devotions with their year levels. And we found that that's a wonderful opportunity, not only for our students to have input from God's word and to pray together, but of course to be set up for the day, starting off together, receiving instructions from their year level coordinators, and then going off to begin their timetable and begin their work. We've been really blessed with a really reliable platform in Canvas for curriculum delivery. We've had very few interruptions. We did have a couple of times in which there was excessive traffic on the global network, but we received information about that immediately and it was resolved within an hour with very little disruption to students and teachers. We've been very grateful for the work of our ICT services on campus, who've been able to help individual students and parents who've called up with particular problems. And also through our ICT services, we've been able to send out a number of loan devices to families who've needed them to ensure that all our students have access to the resources that they need to successfully step into remote learning during this time. So it's been wonderful to see the students rising to the challenge and developing greater ownership over their learning. We realise, of course, for teenagers, this is not easy. Independent learning and doing it in a very rapid way has meant that students have had to grow muscles of self-motivation and all those sorts of skills that, of course, will be really valuable to them as young adults. But sometimes as parents and teachers, we can become impatient with that process, and it is a learning process to keep yourself on task. And so it's great to see students growing in that. And we know that the benefit of that will continue even when they return back on campus, as they have a new realization of their own role in their learning and growth. There's been enormous growth in digital skills for our students and teachers, and that's something that we want to take out of this experience as a definite positive for Heathdale. We want to continue to provide those digital resources and expand what we're able to do on our digital platform, both during this time of remote learning and throughout the year as we return to campus studies. There has no doubt been some learning experiences in this. And things that we are responding to. One of the things that became evident over the first fortnight is that there was an imbalance of work at some year levels. We did have some reports of some year levels having very heavy workloads, and we've sought to address that over this second fortnight, and we'll continue to do that. If you have concerns over your student having a particularly heavy workload, I'd urge you to get in touch with their year level coordinator. We're trying to find the Goldilocks principle, not too little and not too much, and it's taking us a little while to settle on what is the right amount to expect of a student working independently at home, while still encouraging our students to keep going and make sure that they're getting Term 2's essential learning done. We're also looking at the way that we deliver tasks, looking at the context that students are learning in, breaking tasks down into smaller components to give students a sense of achievement as they get things done, and to help them to continue to move through their work and set them up for success during this time. And of course, we're also looking at students' needs in terms of their social and emotional need for connection during this time. I think we're walking into about the 7th week of students being home and away from their usual social network. And that's something that we're starting to lean into heavily in terms of finding ways for them to connect during this time. A good example of that, if you get a chance to see it, is this week's PE challenge for years 7 to 12, with some teachers throwing down the gauntlet for things that they can do at home to see if the students can work on their skills this week and send in a video of them doing it better. We also have our Year 7 camp, which would have been due to happen this week. We've been able to move that online, and our Year 7s are moving into a Minecraft education space with their homeroom teacher and our Head of Learning module, Mr. Daniel Daroon, and doing some very exciting things in Minecraft this week. So going forward, a couple of things perhaps for Year 12 parents. VICA has now given us some really clear direction on what Year 12 will look like. They've confirmed that the Year 12 exams will definitely take place at the end of this year, and they have now published modified study designs for each of the subjects. They've moved to reduce the requirements for Unit 4, which is the second half of the year, to make sure that as students return to campuses in the future, that teachers and students will be able to adequately catch up, cover the required curriculum, and be well prepared for exams at the end of the year. I attended the principal's briefing from VICA over the Year 12 arrangements, and I was really encouraged by the very measured, sensible, straightforward approach that VICA had taken, and I have real confidence that they've developed a very fair system for our students across the state, which will allow them to take their exams and receive their ATARs and move into university next year. We have decided for secondary that we will not be holding mid-year exams for years 7 to 11. This will enable us, when we get back to campus teaching, to prioritise face-to-face teaching. During that time, teachers are going to prepare alternative assessments rather than a full exam week, which will enable us to accurately measure student progress and to complete mid-year reports as usual, but also to make the most of all the time that we have with our students to finish off the first semester of learning. We are beginning to post out interim reports this week, so you should expect to see that this week or next week. We weren't able to complete them at the end of term 1 as we would have liked due to disruption, but they will come out now, and there will be the ability for parents to have a parent-teacher interview over the phone in replacing our usual parent-teacher nights. Teachers who have particular concerns will contact you for a phone appointment, and after you've received reports, if you feel that there's a teacher that you would like to see about your child's progress, you'll be able to email Werribee Secondary, our Werribee Secondary office, werribeesecondary@heathdale.vic.edu.au, and they will ensure that you get an appointment. So we are going to continue on until such a time as we can come back to the college. Obviously, this is not a situation that is ideal, but we're making the most of it. We're finding the positives. We're delighting in the real growth that students are showing and the real progress that's being made over this time. So Ross, back to you.
Well, thanks, Deb. Thanks for a really good summary of the way things are happening within the secondary context, and really appreciated your candidness about saying these are our learnings and this is what we're going to be doing and how we've taken from those learnings and made some adaptations along the way. So well, again, folks, I'll be saying to you, if you've got a particular question that you would like to ask, put it in the chat, Pone, and then the team behind the scenes will more than happy to gather those questions for us, and then Graham or Deb and myself will be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you put up. So please shoot away, ask any question that you feel that you need to ask. There is actually already one question, and I'm happy to kick this one off. I'm not too sure. No, are you two either desperate to deal with this one, or would you? Okay. The first question was about, will there be any additional fee credits applied? And I think what I need to first say a couple of little things about that. It was I was really pleased and proud of our board, who was prepared to actually say there is ways in which we can support our families. And they actually, one of the things in the conversation of that was, it wasn't just going to be one strategy. It was going to be a multiple sort of strategies. So, and some fee relief, which is what all families were able to receive through the credit back that had to do with their educational levy as well as the volunteers levy. But in addition to that, there was also the opportunity for families to defer their payments or even seek out additional concessions. And we were able to meet every family who actually applied for those financial support. We were able to meet every one of those families' needs. But if you had have noticed, the wording of my letter was quite deliberate when I announced to you about the credit back with to do with the resources levy as well as the volunteers levy. It was, this is an initial. And the reason was why we called it an initial is that we were going to basically do a wait and see. If we needed to, and we felt that it was justified to give some additional credits back, we would continue to look at those, or either fee credits of some way. But in answering that, one of the things I do want to bring to your the wider community's attention. At the end of the day, we have only two sources of income. 50% of our income comes from government funds and that we get from the fees that we get from the government, and 50% comes from you as you pay your school fees. And it's that amount of money that we actually operate on. And of that, about 78% of our income is actually spent on staff and their salaries. So one of the things that we are really mindful of is that we have not made any staff redundant or stood down at this point in time. We've continued to employ our staff, and so therefore we have continued to pay our staff. And this is why we have not considered any additional discounts at the moment, because of we want to actually honour our staff in that from there. So our income is fixed and our expenditure is fixed. However, the other thing is that it's almost a philosophical position, and that is Is there a need to give a credit back on tuition fees because we are not delivering the curriculum out on campus? What I have actually said to families who have actually asked me that is, one of the things is I was not going to offer a discount of tuition fees up front. One of the things I was going to do was assess as time went on of if we were unsuccessful in being effective in the delivery of the Heathdale curriculum via remote learning. And my observation that I've seen and the feedback from parents, overwhelming feedback from parents has been that we have been very successful. We've done the best we can. Have we done it perfectly? No. And Deb alluded to that before, but have we continued to improve and continue to make that effective? Absolutely. And I think that that's one of the things I would say, that we have continued to support students' learning. And so that way is why I've not considered an additional credit of fees at this point in time. So, but if there was a point where, in all honesty, that we felt that we didn't put our best foot forward and that that we did need to give a credit, I would not hesitate from making that decision and doing that credit. But at the moment, I'm saying what my observation and the data and feedback I'm getting doesn't actually require me to consider additional fee credit at this point in time. Sorry for the long answer, but I just thought it's important to have some context. Oh, thank you. Another question, and maybe Graham, you might like to answer this one. And so the question is, would you consider bringing Year 12s into school for their SACs at least, as I know there are some causing concern and stress for our Year 12 students? Graham?
Okay, thank you. That is a particular question that we've considered at length, because a number of staff would love to be able to do that. I think all of us would really like to. But I'll just set a little bit of context before giving the answer. The context is when the Andrews government said that Victorian schools were moving to remote learning, their instructions were that if any task can be done remotely, it must be done remotely. And so that's where we have to operate. Now, looking at particular subjects, mostly within the science area or within the material design area, such as vet engineering, vet furniture making, etc., there are some times and tasks that cannot be done remotely. Students have to be able to access a particular piece of equipment in order to complete a particular assessment task. In those circumstances only, we can bring Year 12s on site for their SACs or for their work. Outside of that, we are not permitted to do so. We have to do it remotely. My Year 12s this afternoon are going to start their first English SAC. I would much rather be in the room with them. And that's the natural response of us as teachers. And I'm sure as students and as parents, we're all in agreement there. But the context in which we're operating says if it can be done remotely, it must be. This may change on May the 11th. It may not, but it may. And we'll have a very close look at what they say. And whatever room we have to operate, we will use to the full. But at the moment, we're not in the position to be able to do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Graham. Deb, did you want to add anything to that at all? Or
no, I think that's a clear point. We have had some groups in VCE coming on site in the last couple of weeks where we've needed to, and we'll continue to do that to make sure that those practical subjects aren't disadvantaged.
Actually, Graham, I might have a follow-up question. So thanks for actually sharing the fact that you talked about your Year 12 Englishes starting the SAC. So what have you been doing to actually help prepare them to do the SAC online, as opposed to if we had been on campus, you would have had a particular routine. So what have maybe you and the other Year 12 English teachers been doing to support the Year 12s to prepare them for the SAC this afternoon?
Well, there's been a couple of different areas. One's been within the context of English and the other one's been the context of remote learning. So in the context of English, we've done effectively what I would have done in the classroom. And that's been talking through exactly how to respond to an essay and how to write it. I've marked probably on average 2 or 3 practice essays per student. Not everyone's written 2 or 3, but some have made up the gap. And so given specific feedback there. We've talked about how to construct and use quotes and how to discuss those in depth. So all of the normal pedagogical learning steps we've been following via remote learning, set up discussions on Canvas and run drop-in conferences so students can raise questions and respond one-on-one in addition to presenting a lesson. So that's what we've done there. In terms of by doing it remotely, what we have done is set up a quiz, which will run for 3 hours. They'll receive 3 different prompts, choose one of those and respond in that. We've made the expectations of the task explicitly clear, the process by which they should log on, make sure that they've finished within a 3-hour period. That was all made clear. We went over it in our conferences last week. We posted that on Canvas last week, and it's still sitting there now. The grade descriptions of response, the rubric that we use to mark the assessment, that's been online as well, so that's available for students, and it's linked into the quiz as well. So we've given them all the resources that we can to try and support them, and I honestly believe that they are set up, but we do also acknowledge that doing it in a new way for the first time is a stressful thing to do, and that's something that we're, as students, we'll be praying that you're able to respond well in that situation. We're also, going to be online during the actual SAC, so that if something arises, they are able to, any student can send an email, Teams in, we are available during the SAC as well. So there's just, we're doing what we can.
No, that's good.
It's great that we have been able to work with what we have within Canvas to run SACs remotely, especially for our Year 12s. You can imagine that there may be some schools in a position where they're just having to save up all these SACs until the students can return to school, in which case they're going to have several weeks of just back-to-back SACs, which not only will affect the face-to-face teaching time, but you can imagine will be enormously pressured time and stressful. So although there's some stress in adjusting to doing the SAC remotely, being able to keep to a regular rhythm of getting through the SACs as we go through this extended period of time will actually be the best thing for our students, rather than holding them all back until we return and then dumping them all on them. So I think it's working out well at Year 11 and 12.
I think you both have picked up a really important point there. And Graham, yours sits around the pragmatic of the immediate. You're right. The first time you enter something, it is actually strange, and therefore for some it can be unnerving. But to know that the English teachers are online during the SAC, and a student, like even if they were in the room in a SAC, and say, "Sir, can you ask that question?" So they've actually got that access is really good. And the one, Deb, you're right, the stepping back and bigger and saying, rather than have this huge wave, as it were, of SACs to come in term 3 or whatever, it's actually saying, no, and I think you touched on it before about the rhythm of Year 12 and holding and building that rhythm is really good.
It's really important.
So thanks, that really great pieces of information for families from there.
I see our next question is on the VCE and Year 12 exams.
Do you want to pick it up? Because it was just asking, so the question is, has there been a decision on when exactly the VCE exams will be held this year from the Victorian Government? And are you able to provide the schedule and confirm the dates which the exams will be conducted? Now, you made reference to this, Deb, so do you want to pick it up?
Well, interestingly, May is the month that traditionally VICA gives us the exam dates anyway. So we're actually not behind at all, because had we been in a normal situation, the exam dates still
Well,
wouldn't be
no,
out.
right.
We would be getting them this month anyway. And so they've let us know that they're working on those and that will come out during the month. They have signalled that instead of them taking place in November, they're going to move them to December. And we would assume that would be early December because they'll want to have it wrapped up over Christmas so that universities have time to work with the ATARs to offer places. So that's what we're expecting. We don't have that schedule yet, but we wouldn't have that schedule at this time anyway. But as soon as we do, that's a public document and we'll pass that on, obviously, to students immediately.
Just by way of context, in previous years when we've had the November exams, the first exam has actually fallen in the last Wednesday of October. So I'm guessing that we will see exams commence in the last week of November. But yeah, we don't know for certain yet. We just know they've said December exam period.
Yeah, okay, that's good. Actually, here's another one that I'm going to throw to both of you. It's a really interesting one. It says, how do you, and because both of you mentioned the conferences and working with classes of students at the same time, but how do you as teachers, and maybe you can actually reference your own classes as well as your colleagues, ensure that there is an active engagement from all students during conference times? Or in other words, they're not passing virtual notes and comments and while the lesson's going on. Actually, Graham, I'll get you to kick off, and then Deb, you can follow up if that's okay.
Okay. There's a few things that we do. I mean, firstly, obviously taking the role, making sure that students are present is important in that. Secondly, one thing that I don't do it in this particular case alone, but I try and make sure that students understand the relevance and significance of what we're discussing. Now, that works probably better at a Year 12 level than some of the more junior levels. Another thing I do is I seek to ensure that students are always actively engaged by asking them questions. So I make sure there's an awful lot of that. And it's very primitive, but I use the names written on an isopole stick in a coffee cup, and I don't even know who I'm going to ask, but that means the students don't either. So just seeking through that way. I stop and ask for feedback on multiple occasions. One of the things I find that I have to say is, I feel like I've explained that really well. Do you agree? Is this actually making sense to you? So
that's very courageous of you, Graham, isn't it? Because you could get some very interesting feedback.
Yeah, well, it's helped a couple of times. So there's that degree of those are some of the strategies that I use. In terms of the chat is another function. So I'd throw a question, and rather than asking one student, I'll be, guys, I need all of you to write a response in the chat, and I can see them come up. I can then check through and say, okay, so this student didn't reply. Guess who's getting the first question next time? So just some key areas like that. But I haven't developed a large number of strategies because in the whole, I've been really impressed with how my students have been working.
Deb?
Yeah, there's a whole stack of things we can do, and there's quite a difference, as Graham said, between what you might do with your VCE class and what you might do with a very large class of maths students lower down in Year 7 or 8. But some of the things that we are doing is asking students to put their mics on to answer certain questions, writing questions in the chat. I've used quick polls with some of my students where they all have to quickly answer a poll that's embedded into the conferencing system that we're using. I know that some teachers have opened up an interactive whiteboard screen within the live conferencing where students can actually type or write into what they're doing. Teachers are using OneNote so that their students can all type responses into one document and edit a document together. Teachers are using fun games like Kahoot, which is an online quiz game that everybody plays together. And so there's a whole stack of those things. This has been a huge learning curve. It's very different to try and engage someone digitally than it is when you've got them face to face in the classroom. But each week, I think we're getting better at it and moving through it.
Hey, I'm going to do a sort of put you on the spot here at the risk of identifying your own children, right? Now, so let's take that question again, and you've answered that really well as teachers. But if I was a parent, how do I actually look at and observe to make sure that my kid is actually engaged and not, playing a game? It doesn't mean I'm saying you're sitting there beside them, but you might be walking. So what are maybe some of the little things that you might have done as parents? Because both of you have been actually working from home and having your own children trying to manage their learning as well. So, you've been in the same boat as most of our families. So what have you guys done as parents? So, Deb, I'm going to ask you to start first.
First of all, it's trying to be quite aware of when they have their live classes. So we've got them on the fridge. I think most people have a different one for each child. And so at the start of the day when I'm getting my breakfast, I'm going, okay, this one has these 3 and this one has these 2. And then going back around after the conferences happened and said, oh, how was your maths conference today? What did you do? Just checking in on, can they tell me what happened in there? What was fun? What did they enjoy? What part did they play in there? Sometimes I've walked past a bedroom door and I've been able to hear them interacting in French or in Latin, or one of my students, I know there's teachers getting students to take turns if they're reading a quote from the textbook or something like that. So I can hear that there's stuff going on.
That's good.
I also tend to think too that it's important that our children get a sense of trust from us, and that they then respond to that. So if we go to them with an expectation that they will take it seriously, and we're encouraging about that, we're encouraging them when they do it, and they have a sense that this really is their responsibility, not my responsibility to chase, but theirs. And then, of course, if you are getting those emails from teachers to say that your son or daughter is not turning up to class, then I would really be taking action on that.
That's good. So, Graham, maybe you could add a little bit further, because given the fact that one of your children is in the junior primary area and also with your wife, Jane, is also on teacher here. So maybe think of it, because I hear Deb in particular where the age of her children are at, maybe sort of in terms of your daughter in the younger years.
What I find most useful with Abby is I can come and actually talk with her about the work. And in fact, and this is a key difference between grade 2 and year 8, she comes to me and talks about the work, which is exciting too. So we're able to have a lot of interaction there. In fact, some of the time it's, no, please don't come in, I'm actually in a conference right now. But that's just been good to have those conversations, as well as to explain what the tasks are, and to sometimes when I've got the opportunity, watch a Canvas video, make sure that she's tracking along with that well, and have a discussion with her. So that's been really, really good. And she's been staying on top of things. Probably 2/3 of the work she just dives right in. She's always happy to explain, and then it's just that conversation to support her in the rest. With Chris, my son, he well, firstly, again, conversation's the key. Nothing replaces it. What have you done today? What are your conferences? Fantastic. What was the topic? What was interesting about that? What did you learn? And I can have a conversation about anything other than maths with him, about what he's learned. With maths, he explains it to me, and I nod. So that works fairly well. The other thing there is, and I haven't done this, perhaps I should, but there is the opportunity to jump onto Canvas and to have a bit of an observation of the actual conference as he's sitting and taking part in that. And the third one that we've tried, but he's promised it won't continue, is when that email from the teacher does arrive, we then have a bit of a conversation about exactly what needs to happen. And in a couple of cases, well, there have been 2 cases, and one of which it's like, okay, I really should have sat down and talked to you about Canvas a little bit more, because this is how you could have avoided that. So that's been a bit of learning and reflection on me as opposed to him.
That's good. Hey, look, thanks for sharing from a personal perspective on that as well, because this is another aspect that we're all in this together, and we're all learning together, and we're learning as parents together, so which is really good. An excellent question has come our way. And the next one, it says, when school is back to campus-based learning, will the students be allowed to carry mobile phones to track with the COVID Safe app? And that's a really excellent question. And the short answer is I don't actually have an answer for that at the moment. But that's actually the sort of conversation what I alluded to earlier, saying we are looking at the key things that we need to have in place as we transition from remote learning to campus-based learning. This would be another one of those issues, again, and that we would need to consider, and then how we actually manage that particular strategy. One of the things I get about the importance of the COVID Safe app is is seeing as this is a key part of the strategy of ensuring people's well-being in terms of their health and safety. So that's why it would be seen as a significant conversation that we will consider. So unfortunately, I cannot give you a categorical answer now, but we'll also take this on notice.
Ross, one of the things about that, and we've seen that in the news this week, is that parents would be aware that there are quite strict regulations around what happens if anyone within a school, parent, student, other staff, is found to have COVID-19, that the health department does notify us, and we're required to notify everyone within the school and to go through deep cleaning and things like that. So regardless of where we'll end up with that mobile phone issue, parents can be pretty confident that if there's anyone in the school community who is diagnosed, that the health department does notify us, and we will notify everyone.
And the protocols that sit around that are enacted, so it's good. Well, let's look at the last question that's just popped up. And the question is this: once we return to campus, there are a number of different scenarios. Will it be classes as usual, or will it be classes be able to continue online also if we want our kids at home? And will it be rostered for days for some year levels with social distancing in place? Let me say, great question. It's right at the very heart of what we're trying to do at the moment in our conversations, isn't it? To understand what those steps will look like. One of the really interesting things is to actually even observe what's actually happening in other states, So, what New South Wales is doing is different to South Australia, which is actually different again to Western Australia. And so one of the things that we are using in our conversation is actually trying to map out what is the best response for Heathdale Christian College community. And it may be a combination of all of the above or none of the above. It might be something completely different. But what I want to probably leave you with is the transition plan that we will have put into place is a considered plan, a well-informed plan, and then a plan that will be shared by you, and then be giving you some chances to then think about that plan, and then the plan will be enacted. So, for example, the plan won't be announced on a Monday and then become fully operational on the Tuesday. There will be a period of time when the plan will be announced, but then we'll say this is when we will take first step on that plan. So great question, and thank you for that question to be able to work it there. So just to remind you that there is Matthew Puller and Peter Lamprecht, who are also online, as well as some of the other members of our team who are online, who are willing to actually take further questions and chat with you online. But this is going to draw to conclusion our live streaming time. And again, I just want to say thank you for finding the time for us today, but thank you for the way in which you have actually helped to flatten the curve and allow us to be in a position to think about transitioning back to campus-based learning. So may you enjoy the rest of this day. God bless, and farewell for now.